Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Travis, and this is Bacon and Backpacking. And today we're going to be exploring a very hot topic that pertains to all you guys that watch my channel. You know, the U.S. government cut quite a few park rangers. I believe it was about 1,000, and the impacts and implications that that is going to have. So, what I want to do today is just get all the political bias out of it, get the media spin out of it, and just take a look at like cold hard facts. Okay. So that way you guys can form your own educated opinion on the subject, and base your opinions off of that. All right, so let's take a look at what we're talking about here, guys. So I just pulled up Google real quick. Department of Government Efficiency cuts park rangers. Top stories. So, Forest Service ranger laid off as DOGE cuts thousands, all right? National parks in turmoil. Why rangers hung an upside down flag at Yosemite. Fired rangers warn of chaos at national parks as Musk sweeping cuts remove vital. It continues on. Let's run over to social media, which is obviously, even more polarizing. So this is the alternate National Park Service. Obviously this isn't a government Facebook page or anything. Somebody created this, but join us in solidarity. Fly your American flag upside down, the traditional signal of distress and extreme emergency. All right, so obviously you guys can see this is a big issue. Some people are saying it's going to completely destroy the national parks. Other people are saying it's not a big deal. So I want to kind of articulate just like some facts, just kind of educate everybody on the subject. Okay, one of the first things that I want to bring up here. So how big of a cut are we talking? I want to go ahead and pull some stuff up here for you real quick. Let me share my screen. I'll go ahead and show you directly from the National Park Service how many rangers they say they employ. All right, so from the National Park Service, you'll see right here on the screen, approximately 20,000 strong, the uncommon men and women of the National Park Service share a common trait, a passion for caring for the nation's special places. Okay, so approximately 20,000 park rangers. Now, how many were cut? How many were terminated, laid off, lost their jobs, whatever? So I'm going to go ahead and share here again. So this one is from the Associated Press. So right here, I've got it highlighted. The Trump administration has fired about 1,000 newly hired National Park Service employees who maintain and clean parks, educate visitors, and perform other functions. So basically, what we're looking at, guys, right from the National Park Service, they have 20,000 rangers. That's right from the government website. The Associated Press says that they cut 1,000, and that's consistent. I've looked at multiple news outlets on both the left and the right, and they all seem to be in agreement that about 1,000 rangers were laid off, terminated, or fired with the recent cuts. This is step one. Okay, how large was the Park Service? How large is it now? So I'm sure you guys can do the math. 20,000 park rangers, we lost 1,000 of them, so that is a 5% reduction in the workforce. Okay. Now, I want you guys to keep a couple things in mind. Any statistic can be manipulated. Okay. So let's just keep that in mind, and I'm going to circle back around to that later. But those are just the hard numbers that are facts, okay, without any sort of bias from either side. All right. Now, my next question for you guys, feel free to go ahead and guess down in the comments because I'm curious as to how many people know this, okay? Don't look it up. Do you think the majority of people that do work for the National Park Service are actual, rangers and W-2 government employees? Or do you think that the majority of those employees come from somewhere else, like contractors, volunteers, stuff like that? Go ahead and put in the comments. All right, so let's dive into this. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look. So I Googled up here how many contractors work for the National Park Service. So during peak season, more than 25,000 private sector workers are employed by the National Park Service. All right, so let's put that in perspective. So there's 20,000 rangers and about 25,000 contractors. Slightly more contractors than actual, direct W-2 government employees, right? But, numbers are pretty similar, okay? So we're looking at a 5% reduction in staff. But then when you realize that there's actually about 45,000 people here, you're talking about a cut of 1,000 out of 45,000. So now that percentage drops, even more to about half. So now we're looking at about 2.5% of the people, were cut that work on the National Park Service, right? But there's actually a third category, okay, which is going to be your volunteers. So let me go ahead and pull this up for you real quick. All right. So how many volunteers are there? So this is from performance.gov, which is actually a very useful website to pull up information about like federal government spending and things like that. But right here it says in a typical year, the National Park Service hosts nearly 300,000 volunteers. So let's get our ducks in the row here. 20,000 rangers, 25,000 contractors, 300,000 volunteers. Now, remember how earlier I said that you can manipulate any statistic to make it say whatever you want to say. So let's say that I took the conservative point of view here. I'd say, okay, well, 5% reduction in park rangers, isn't a lot. Okay, park rangers don't even make up the majority, right? There's 25,000 contractors, so 2 or 3% cut, no big deal. Oh my goodness, there's 300,000 volunteers. They obviously do the overwhelming body of work for the National Park Service. And I actually did the math on that one. If you cut 1,000 out of about, was it 345,000? But it comes out to 0.002% of people cumulatively that are working on maintaining the national parks. 0.002% of people that work on the national parks have been cut. So again, if I were trying to take a bias over on this side, I would say, dude, that is such a statistically insignificant number that you can't even remotely determine the effect that would have on operations, right? But again, that would not quite be the full truth now, would it? So let's take a look at the other side, okay? So while it's true that only a very small fraction of a percent of people who maintain the national parks have been terminated, let's dive into, though, not all these people do a similar workload, right? So let's kind of do some math on this. So let's look at the 20,000 rangers. According to the National Park website, National Park Service website, they say rangers work 40 hours. It's a standard work week, but I'm sure some of them, if they, obviously they work overtime, right? But just for math purposes, let's say that they work 40 hours a week. There's 52 weeks in a year, okay? And so they get 2 weeks of vacation. That's probably about average across the country. Comes out to a very nice, even 2,000 hours of work per year. There are 20,000 of them, which means that the Rangers are doing 40 million man hours per year. So just keep that number in your head, 40 million. Now let's go over to the volunteers, because obviously they make up the overwhelming majority of people who maintain the national parks. So again, there's 300,000 of them annually. They put in 6.5 million hours of volunteer work. So even though there's a lot more of them, and this should be common sense, they're obviously, it's not their full-time job. Some of them probably show up and just do, 8, 10, 12 hours one day for trail maintenance or something, and that's it. Some of them might volunteer 3 or 4 months of the year. Maybe they're retired, they're conservationists, they really want to give back, they've got the time, they're not worried about the income, stuff like that. But the point is you have 20,000 people that do 40 million hours of work. Then you have 300,000 people who only do 6.5 million hours of work. So those volunteers don't even account for a quarter of the man hours that the Rangers do, okay? Now, the thing that's going to kind of level the playing field a little bit more are the contractors. So it says contractors are hired to work 40 hours per week for about 20 to 26 weeks. Okay, so 20 to 26, let's average that out to 23. That's the middle. They work 40 hours. So they work almost, a little under half of what the Rangers do. So those contractors put in about 23 million man hours. So the Rangers alone are 40 million. And then the volunteers and contractors are about 29.5 million. So even combined, the volunteers and the contractors do about 3/4 of the amount of work as the full-time Rangers, okay? You have roughly 70 million man hours between the Rangers, the contractors, and the volunteers. With the firing of the Rangers, you're losing about 2 out of 70 million man hours, which is roughly a 3% reduction in man hours, okay? So you don't quite lose 5% production, obviously, because there's, other people than just the Rangers, right? So there's roughly what the statistics say is you're losing about 3% of the work that is currently being done on the national parks, okay? Now, I kind of gave you an example of how to manipulate statistics from one side. Let's kind of talk about how the left could manipulate statistics. Well, I could also say, hey, the National Park Service has been underfunded basically since its existence, right? They were already understaffed. So a 3% reduction is catastrophic. They were already 20% behind. Now let's add another 3% to it. This is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. All right, guys. Now, to make this topic clear as mud, there was one final thing I came across that's very interesting. So I came across this article. I'm going to pull it up for you guys real quick. So this one's interesting. Let's pull up USA Today. I have it highlighted here. So the Department of the Interior is allowing the Park Service to hire 5,000 seasonal workers, which is an exemption to President Donald Trump's ongoing hiring freeze. Now, initial thoughts. I'm sure people that are on the one side of the argument will say, well, hey, they fired 1,000 and now they're bringing on 5,000. That's a net gain. What are you complaining about, right? And I'm sure that on the other side of the aisle, people will be like, well, it's only an exemption, it's only seasonal, and there should be more of them anyway. Right. So let's try to get some more facts on this one too. I'm going to pull the screen share back up. So the real question here is there a net gain or a net loss by bringing on these 5,000 seasonal employees in this exemption? So you got to look up some historical data. What does the National Park Service normally hire for seasonal workers? So let's find out. Let's pull this thing up here. The National Park Service, this was written 3 days ago, was supposed to open up 7,700 seasonal positions this year, okay? Which is up from the 5,000 promised, okay? And the 3-year average is 6,350. Okay, so even since I saw this first headline over here in USA Today that they're bringing on 5,000, it appears that they're actually bringing on about another 2,700 additional, which is actually about about quick math, 1,400 more than is typical over the three-year average. So again, taking kind of like the political spin and bias out of it, here appears to be the overall situation. 5% of park rangers were cut. 7,700 seasonal ones are being added, which is about 1,300 more than your traditional seasonal average. The net overall effect of this thing to me seems to be about break even. While it appears, as of right now, with the information at hand, that there's not a huge, net effect of these recent changes on the National Park Service, there are 3 other things I want to hit real quick so this video doesn't run too long. But there are 3 other things that we need for full context here. So while things don't appear to have changed much with staffing, there's a couple things we need to address. So the first one is, the NPS already has what they say is a $23 billion backlog. So 23 billion, very large number, and that's the backlog, right? A couple things to keep in mind here. So I will say this, this is nothing against the National Park Service, but any sort of government entity, there's one thing that they all need every year, right? And that's more money. So like, let me give you an example. So let's take like the CIA, right? Largest intelligence apparatus in all of human history, most funding, most people, most advanced tech, you name it, right? Every year, when it's time to appropriate money, and you're, appearing before, Congress, every department of government is always like, hey, we're understaffed. We don't have enough money. We don't have this and that. The military does the same thing, guys. Again, by far, we have the largest, most advanced, most expensive, military in all of human history, and it's not even close. Like, it's orders of magnitude above second place, right? And every year, the military is sitting in front of Congress saying, hey, we're broke. We don't have any money, right? So what I'm saying is out of this 23 billion, a lot of it is stuff that probably needs done, but you would triage that, right? So let's say a third of that 23 billion is necessity, right? Like, hey, this is infrastructure issues that could cause like health and safety problems, things like that. So if you had to take an estimate, and there's no way of knowing, I would say probably about a third of that 23 billion is must need repairs, right? Probably a third of it is your nice to have type of stuff, right? And then the final third is probably like wish list type stuff. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying any government agency is always going to say, hey, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough funding, we don't have enough money, right? That's kind of the job of the bureaucrats of those departments, is to, basically get more funding, right? So this isn't unique to the NPS, so I'm not condemning them for that. But I'm just saying, if we're being realistic, out of that 23 billion, what is critical to operations? Who knows, but probably not all of it, right? One of the big elephants in the room is, while net staffing hasn't changed a ton, um, over the last couple of decades, the numbers that I'm seeing are as follows. So the National Park Service has decreased in size, by about 20%. And over that same period of time, visitors to national parks have increased by 16%, right? So, roughly, the National Park Service got, a fifth smaller, and, they're taking on a fifth, more visitors, right? So while the current situation doesn't change that, right? As the years go on, if somebody doesn't address that, obviously that gap is just going to keep getting, wider and wider every single year, to the point where if it's not a problem now, it definitely will be. So that's one of the first things to consider, is that, they're already a little bit stretched thin, right? And then the third thing, the third bullet point here that I don't want to spend a ton of time on, but does need to be addressed, right, is just the human element, right? So it's not unique to this situation that somebody lost their job. Those people, have mortgages, they have families, they have mouths to feed, they have hopes and dreams, just like, the rest of us, right? So it's never a good thing when, somebody gets fired, right? And, I totally understand being empathetic to people in that situation. It's a bad thing, right? But here's the question I want to raise. So, 1,000 got fired. It seems like they brought on about 1,400 extra workers this year, the seasonal ones, compared to the 3-year average. So there appears to be about a net gain of 400 National Park Service employees. Again, these are seasonal, so I bet it kind of just ends up breaking even, right? They're technically 400 to the good, but they're seasonal workers, so like it probably evens out, right? But the point here is, though, is it's like, well, if we fired 1,000 and brought on 1,400, what was the point, right? If the initial idea was to increase government efficiency, I don't know how bringing more people on than what we were originally paying does that. And I think, the second thing is in the short term. So you lost 1,000 people who have been doing the job, which in theory means they'll be more experienced than the people you're replacing them with, meaning you now have to onboard those people and dedicate resources to getting them trained up. And for the first, say, I don't know what it takes to onboard a ranger, right? But say for the first 6 months, they're performing at a lower, level of performance than the people they're replacing. So again, even if this thing all kind of evens out, right, then what was the point? It doesn't look like we lost a ton. It doesn't look like we gained a ton, and it just kind of brings back, like, why did we mess with people's lives in the first place if there's not going to be a net gain out of the situation? Now, the only thing that I can foresee possibly, and hopefully they did this, but I doubt it. And there's no way for us to find this out right now, right? In theory, say they took bottom performers, right, at the park service, like, and a lot of businesses do this, guys, right? It's not unique to this situation, but say they took the bottom 5% of performers. Those are the people that they got rid of. And then they're bringing on highly qualified candidates with a good onboarding process that end up being much better employees, right? That's the only feasible situation in which I could see, well, hey, so we're paying about the same amount of people, but after this is all said and done, we'll get more out of them and therefore be more efficient in the long run. But I mean, that's a stretch, right? There's too many what ifs and variables in there, and I honestly doubt that's what happened, right? So I guess my final thing is, no matter how this shakes out, I don't really see the point in why it was done in the first place. I'm not saying that's my final conclusion that I'm drawing. But guys, I spent hours and hours and hours and hours digging into this thing to try to get to the bottom of it, because it's so hard to find something that isn't biased. And so I just present this information to you guys. Feel free to fact check it, dig into it, see what other research you can do. And hey, by the time I release this video, it might be old information already. Something could have changed, right? I could wake up tomorrow and see that we sold the national parks all to China. I don't know, right? So, but anyways, guys, hopefully this gets rid of some bias no matter what side of the aisle on. You can take a look at some data, make your own educated opinions. And I know with me on a lot of issues, my opinions evolve over time. As the situation develops and new information comes in, maybe I do take a stance or I change my opinion. But as of right now, it seems to be about an overall net even situation. Um, so, I'll let you guys decide. Put down in the comments below, what do you guys think about this? But guys, I hope this really helps. This is a first of this type of video for the channel. I've never done anything that even remotely touches on politics before, but obviously this issue, directly concerns all of us, right? So I hope you guys like the video. I hope it helps. But if you're new to the channel, I've got like 40 backpacking trip videos on the channel, which is what I would prefer to do. I've got gear reviews, tips, tricks, hacks, things like that, guys. I am just a backpacking content channel. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Weigh in your opinions below. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And hopefully the next time I see you guys, it's on a trail. Have a good one.